I'll let him talk about his story a little bit more, moving on. But he is the co-founder of Alesca Life, and he's taken urban farming beyond a small little urban farm. So yes, please, may we have Mr. Stuart Oda. Round of applause, guys.
Hi guys. First of all, before I get started, a huge congratulations to everyone. I cannot believe how good the presentations were, honestly. I'm a little bit older than you guys, and I just came back from a competition in Singapore, and you guys would have crushed the competition, so congratulations. I guess, and again, before I jump into my talk, one thing that I wanted to mention at the very beginning is that there's something that connects all of us together, and it's actually what the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation call the impatient optimist. And the impatient optimist is any entrepreneur or anybody that supports an entrepreneur. We all believe that tomorrow is better than today, and we are just too impatient to wait for somebody else to make that change happen. We want to be the agent of change. So everybody here that is aspiring to be an entrepreneur, to make things better, faster, cheaper, safer, is an impatient optimist, and I'm really excited to see so many of you in this crowd. So I guess just to get started. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so a little bit about myself before I get started. I'm a former investment banker. I'm actually a second-generation Japanese American. I was born in the US. I spent quite a bit of time in Singapore. I went to high school and middle school in Singapore. I went to college at UCLA, and I studied political science thinking I would become a lawyer, and I ended up graduating and becoming a banker, which my parents were very confused about. And then I worked in Japan for 5 years, covering 60 companies and 15 different industries. And after I did banking and finance for a little while, I wanted to really learn about emerging market countries. The most interesting to me was China. And I also wanted to be on the side of developing strategy, some of the things that you guys talked about in your pitches. And so I left everything. I came to China without ever having stepped foot here or speaking Chinese. And I worked at Dell Computers. And I was in a very special team at Dell called the Global Emerging Markets team, the GEM team. And our task was to make Dell relevant in 10 of the fastest growing countries in the world. And the furthest one that I covered was Mexico, and I covered everything from Brazil to Turkey to Poland, Indonesia, India, Russia, South Africa, and also China. And after a couple years of that, I got a little bit antsy, and I realized that as I was doing my research into these 10 countries, it became clear that the challenge of infrastructure was common among all of them. And most people, when they think about infrastructure, think about telecommunications. How do you access information and data? And the one that I was focused on was roads. And because the infrastructure wasn't as reliable, there were challenges with access to food and nutrition. And so I left Dell and I started Alesca Life 6 years ago. And the reason why it says that I'm a Bible salesman over there is because Alesca Life to me is the name of my religion, and really the vision that we're trying to sell is that we're trying to democratize access to fresh and nutritious food by democratizing the means and knowledge of production. This is essentially the vision that my team is trying to accomplish across the entire world. And somebody, when I was starting my entrepreneurial journey, told me very early on that when you become an entrepreneur and then you quit everything, you're going to need to address the challenges and address your work and need to convince partners, investors, and potential hires with the same intensity as if you're preaching religion. And so I was told to practice presenting Alesca Life to somebody, and in an hour, if I can convince them that this was the right way to go, that they would burn in hell. And with that intensity, I started. And a little bit about kind of what Alesca has. The great thing about entrepreneurship is that there's a huge opportunity to travel around the world. I didn't update the map for 2019 because it just became too messy, but over the past couple of years, I've had an opportunity to travel all over the world. The problems that you guys were talking about and the companies that you guys were looking to found have global implications. You guys are talking about billions and trillion-dollar economies, and this allows you to have access to anywhere in the world. Of course, you should conquer your home market first, but you have an opportunity to have enormous reach across the globe, and I'm really excited about that. And this is a little bit of a snapshot of where I've been traveling. I went to Dubai last year 23 times. I've been to the States 4 times in 2 months this year already. And it's really exciting that you can start a company that might be in your bedroom or that might be in your apartment, and that so many people around the world will care, if you care. And another thing is that I've had an opportunity to meet some of my entrepreneurial heroes throughout this journey. So I had a chance to meet Bill Gates, I had a chance to present to Jeff Bezos, I had a chance to present to prime ministers, and also I had a chance to do a cooking collaboration, a live cooking show with a Michelin star chef. And these are all things, when I started the company, I would never have imagined would have been possible. And so one of the things that I would try to keep in mind as you guys are on this journey is that most of the time, the thing that is limiting you most is yourself. It's very challenging to actually dream bigger than what you're capable of accomplishing. So yeah, today I'm going to talk a little bit about food and agriculture. Most people talk about food a lot and don't really talk about agriculture. Food is what shows up at the supermarket or shows up on your plate at a restaurant. And agriculture is the production, the processing, and logistics of that food so that it can get to you. And I was always told not to start a talk with statistics, but I'm going to start with statistics. Just so that we're on the same page, the main thing to keep in mind actually from this slide is the fact that in the next 30 to 40 years, we're going to have to produce more food than we did in the past 10,000 years combined. And that's a factor of that our populations are growing, but also the fact that our diets are changing. As urbanization, as population increasing and all these things are happening, there's also a lot of challenges. And one of the main challenges is actually, are these things. And so in order to prevent major catastrophes from happening, governments are incentivized to produce more food. So naturally there's more food waste. Also because of poor infrastructure, there's also a lot more food waste. The distance that food travels in the US has increased over the past 10 years significantly. And this is again a factor that our diets are changing. And a lot of people are getting sick. In China alone, about 100 million people get sick from food every year and can't make it to work at least one day of the year. And this industry alone is worth about $10 billion in one country. The food waste industry alone is worth $1 trillion. So if you guys can solve food waste, if you could solve that, you would have one of the biggest companies on the planet. And one thing to note is that we're always told to conserve water and to be kind of eco-friendly by being careful about our consumption. Agriculture is actually responsible for 70% of all water usage wherever it exists. So we could all in this room, in fact, everybody in Beijing can cut our water consumption in half, and that would only reduce the overall water consumption of Beijing by 5%. And so for me, one of the biggest challenges is if we can solve the challenge of agriculture and its wastefulness with water, we can have a much bigger impact than telling every person in a city to use half the water that they currently use. And so in order to address a lot of these challenges, my team decided to develop modular, compact, high-density farms. And one of our biggest differentiators is the fact that these farms can be placed anywhere. And so the farm that you see in the top left is in an underground parking structure in central Beijing. We've converted shipping containers and turned them into farms. We've turned restaurant corners and also office buildings into farms. And if you look around, there's a lot of unused infrastructure and unused space in the middle of the city. And we are going through one by one and converting a lot of this space into farms. And what's exciting is that in your home countries, you might have Grab or Uber or Didi here. These ride-sharing companies are actually changing the way in which urban infrastructure is being used. And one of the big disruptors is that people have stopped parking their cars. So you'll take a car to go from your house, let's say, to here, and then the driver will continue the journey. And no longer does the driver have to look for parking anymore. And in the States, about 30% of urban infrastructure in metropolitan city centers is parking lots. And so what's exciting is that as these new services become more available to all of us, it's actually changing a lot of what we currently use every single day, and is turning them completely obsolete in some cases. And so we're really excited about some of the discussions that we're having about converting unused parking lots, even at airports, into farms. And to make this happen, some of the basic tech that we have, obviously it's hydroponic. It's also completely indoors, which means we don't use any sunlight. So we use specialized LEDs. We developed our own automation. We use a biodegradable medium, so we don't use any soil. And we use vertical racks. And currently our racks go up to 6 floors, and now we're designing a system that can go up to 13 floors. And this type of farming allows food to be produced in a new method. So right now there's many methods of transportation. You can ride a bicycle, you can ride a car, you can ride an airplane, you can ride a rocket. And with food production, there aren't that many different methods of food production. And that's one of the big reasons why agriculture is so inefficient. If you're trying to get from your apartment across the lobby, riding a car is probably the least efficient thing to do, and riding a train or a rocket is probably dangerous. But because you have so many different modes of transportation, it allows you to pick the most efficient one, and most of these in the city center are accessible. And for food production, there aren't that many methods of food production. There's traditional farms, there's greenhouses, and now indoor farms are popping up. And indoor farms are fantastic at a certain variety of crops. And with the varieties of crops that we grow, we can use, right now it's 95. Compared to the traditional agriculture that exists here, we use 97.5% less water, fertilizer, and land. And we also use no pesticides. And so it's really exciting to think that as LEDs, as automation, as IoT and sensors, all these technologies become more available, we can start disrupting industries that haven't really changed in 10,000 years. Since you guys were talking about more of the practical applications of technology, I thought I'd talk about our moonshots. So Alesca's moonshots are kind of up here, but if we can accomplish any one of these 6 things, I think I can look back and say it was a success. And obviously we're focused on making food accessible to everybody, but the extension of our technology, what we are capable of doing once the technology has matured to a point where we can make food more accessible to everybody, we can focus on bigger problems. And one of the things that we're working on is making food free. And I get a lot of questions about this one, but we're working with health insurance and life insurance companies to see if you purchase high quality, healthy, fresh produce locally, can they reduce your premium? So if you pay $1 for your fresh produce, can your premium go down by $1, effectively making that food free? And we're trying to find ways in which we can have new business models that would allow food and nutrition to be more accessible to more people. I love talking about, and the other thing is about local medicines. There's a company in the UK that we're in discussions with right now. They found a way to actually infect a tobacco plant with a virus that can get the tobacco plant to stop producing nicotine and can produce the precursor to the polio vaccine. And what's interesting about plants is that the hardware of the plant can be reprogrammed using viruses. It can be reprogrammed biologically to do things that currently it has either been too expensive to do or it's been impossible to do. And what's exciting is that if this is possible and can be commercialized, we can grow medicinal plants inside of our indoor farms all around the world. So no longer would you have to grow certain things in certain locations. Right now, for most vaccines, we're using chicken eggs, which is very expensive and time-consuming. We can find different ways to do the same thing. Affordable calories. Right now, if you get locked in our container farm or in any of our farms, you would starve because there's not enough calories to sustain you. So one thing that we're working on is to grow potatoes and things that are dense in calories. And the more and more we can do these things cost effectively, the more we can make the impact that we want to see. And the last thing, and the thing that I love talking about most, is farming on a different planet. What's interesting is that in 20 years, and at least within 50 years, easily within most people's years lifetime, hopefully within mine too, a doctor, an engineer, and a farmer will be the three most respected professions on another planet. You don't need a banker, you don't need a lawyer. You know, there's a lot of services that you don't need, but one of the things that you will need is food. In order to blast food off this planet, every kilogram right now costs anywhere between $10,000 to $30,000. A head of lettuce can weigh 1 kg. And so, you know, we can't continue to send food from Earth to these other planets. And so it's really exciting to think that, you know, what was, previously or even currently a highly stigmatized industry will become, and a profession will become one of the most respected and also one of the most vital professions on the planet. And, you know, in order to make those things happen, it requires collaboration with people all over the world, and definitely within your own networks, but also all over the world. And we work very closely with governments, with universities, with students, you know, with a lot of tech companies. And this collaboration allows us to make a bigger impact. It's rare that one person alone can make an enormous impact. It's often the case that the more you reach out to people, the more you collaborate, the more you engage, the more you can accomplish. And so I would encourage all of you guys to, you know, at the beginning when I started out, I was really paranoid people would steal my idea, and then I realized that the more and more I told people about what I'm doing and gave them an opportunity to see what I'm working on, the technology took off in directions that I could never have imagined. And so on that topic, a little bit about space, this is kind of the two things that I was told, one very recently, one quite a while ago, about, and it's a little bit of advice for entrepreneurs. And it's, to wrap everything up, it's actually in the concept of space. And in order to go really, really far in space, to explore as deep as possible, you need to build a really, really efficient rocket ship. And a really efficient rocket ship has two things. It has the lowest amount of friction, and it has the maximum amount of fuel. And so friction is things that would prevent your users or customers or governments from helping you or adopting your technology. So finding ways in which to reduce friction will help whatever that you do in your life, be it a company or a profession. Your career and your company will soar farther if you can remove that friction for people. And so some of the things that we work on is disruptive business models that would make it easier for people to access our products and access our services. And so, like I said, one of the things would be free food. If the thing is free, then at least financially there's no friction. And then the other thing is about fuel. And fuel can be everything from the $10,000 check, for example, it can be cash in the bank, but it can also be motivation for you and your team and the people around you. So to maximize motivation for people to help you, or for people to work for you, or for people to care, it requires a certain dedication and a certain care from your side. And so I can tell from the pitches already that you guys have a lot of this already. But the more people you can get to care, the more people you can get to help out, the further you can go. So these are the kind of two things that I would keep in mind. And then the Constellate is a concept that I learned from one of the heads of Google X. This individual actually built Google Glass in 10 weeks. And he told us about the concept of constellating. If you look up at the night sky and you see the stars, if you connect every single dot, you get a giant spider web. You actually can't see, there is nothing there. But if you connect the right dots, it can turn into an image, and that image can turn into a story, the story can turn into a mythology, and the mythology can turn into religion. And so his whole thing about how he got the product out so quickly was to create constellations very quickly. And so the idea is to take key learnings, so things that you learned throughout your entrepreneurial journey or through school, and then also to look into your network of people that are around you, that are your cheerleaders, that are your fans, and also look at the resources that you have access to, and to connect the right ones. I think oftentimes a lot of the discussion that we have is around just connecting dots. And if you look backwards, you can see how the dots are connected. But if you want to look forwards, you have to make sure that you can connect the right dots. And so a lot of the things that he talked about was about how quickly can you take the key learnings, even from today or last month, or the last 10 years, and then put that together with the networks that you have and the resources that you have, create the constellations, an image that makes sense to you, and then to be able to take that further. So as much as possible, I would try to find ways in which you can take all the things that are around you and then to try to make sense of them by by creating these constellations. And one thing that's I'll leave on a private note. A lot of people ask me how I went from banking to an IT company to farming, and it's actually it's not a very linear path, and so it's really difficult for me to explain. But the banker in me will tell you that agricultural supply chain is $20 trillion. It's the biggest supply chain on the planet. There is no industry, there is no civilization doesn't exist without two things, without water and food. So cell phone penetration might be high, tourism and aviation penetration might be high, and also connectivity might be high, but there's no industry on the planet that is 100% wherever humans exist, and food is one of them. The other reason is obviously I'm hugely passionate about food and travel, and I want to make an impact in the places that I love to travel to. But when these two things don't really convince them, all I can say is that right now my profession is about making small modular farms, networked farms all around the world. Right now we're in Beijing, we've launched in Singapore, we're in Dubai, we're launching in Cape Town in Saudi Arabia very, very soon. And this is actually my last name in Japanese and also in Chinese, Oda. And this, I recently read an article about how your name, and particularly your last name, can have a really strong impact on your professional career. And the direct translation of my name is actually small farm. And sometimes, if I guess I've been around long enough where there's a lot of coincidences that happen, and I feel most at ease with what I'm doing right now, not in finance, not in IT, and right now in agriculture. I work right now with the same urgencies that I travel, which means that I go to places that won't be the same 10 years from now. And this might be bad advice, and if there's any parents in the room, I apologize, but I work with the same urgency that I, which means that if I think I can do something 10 years from now, I don't do it today. That doesn't apply to studying, but for me, if the amount of energy and passion it requires to start a company and to get people around the world to care, and then to be successful, it takes, not that we're successful, but it takes an enormous amount of energy. And I can't do this most likely 10 years from now. But based on what I've seen when I was in banking for a total of 7 years, and then when I was at Dell for 2 years, these are professions I know I can go back to even 20 years from now. Right now, food and agriculture requires the brightest and smartest minds. In China alone, we will lose 100 million farmers, not because of age, just purely because they will move to the city centers. There's no industry on the planet that can benefit more from machine learning, from AI, from automation, robotics, than farming, in my mind. And so I feel compelled almost to dedicate my youth and my energy, my passion, to something that I think is very, very important, but also something that's meaningful to me. And to me, it's almost kind of like fate. But the fact that my last name and also what I'm doing right now happens to be exactly aligned. Sometimes I have no other way to explain it than what I'm doing right now is what I'm meant to be doing. So thank you very much, and congratulations to all you guys.
Okay.